We just watched this weekend, and we are giving you our Beyond the Film Room breakdown.
Welcome back to the channel. I'm Joslin.
I'm Jaden.
And this is Beyond the Film Room, where we break down films through the perspective of the four cores of peak performance. And as Jaden just mentioned, we saw Fantastic Four twice over the past 3 days, and this will be our full breakdown. Spoiler alert, as always, if you haven't seen the movie, definitely go see it. Come back and watch the film and watch the breakdown. Before we jump into the four cores, though, what was just your overall impression of the film?
Yeah, no, I really liked it. I think it was really nice to get a good Fantastic Four movie. I'm not really a fan of the old ones that came out way back early 2000s, and then obviously the remake with Michael B. Jordan and Miles Teller. I wasn't a fan of those, and Fantastic Four is a team that I'm familiar with a little bit in the comics. Haven't been a fan of them with the movies, and so I haven't been super invested in them, but now I am fully invested into this family and this group of characters, and I'm really excited to see what they have in store for the future of the MCU. But overall, I really liked the movie. I know there's some mixed reviews out there, but the majority consensus seems like people liked it, and I loved it. I think it's probably in my top 10, maybe in my top 10 MCU movies. It was enjoyable. It was great.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was a great movie. I don't agree with the mixed reviews. I think just as a film overall and a fun summer blockbuster and a great family film, this film is right up there. The cinematography is great.
Yeah.
The setting is great. The production design is great. Like everything, it just felt fresh in the same way that Superman felt fresh as a take on the superhero genre. And for this character, this movie doesn't really feel like any other MCU movie that we've seen.
No, not at all. I think visually this has to be maybe the best MCU movie in terms of just like how good the CG was and all the different scenes in space and everything like that. I've been seeing a lot of comments on the whole space sequence with Silver Surfer chasing them and them trying to get away from Galactus. I mean, it's just like visually it's very stunning, and they did an amazing job. Galactus is crazy. Silver Surfer looks great.
Yeah.
The way that they display the powers of the Fantastic Four, it's just, and I loved the characters. I think that the casting was amazing. I think that everyone played the role really, really well. And you could tell that they loved each other.
Yeah, let's jump into it then. I think that's a great segue. And we don't necessarily have to go in order of the four cores. If you don't know, it's kind of physical, mental, relational, and then spiritual. But let's talk about the relational piece, because I think that's the core of this movie. Mm-hmm. That is the defining fact of who the Fantastic Four is. I mean, they're Marvel's first family, right? Like they were the first superhero group, happened to be a family as well, and they were written and created by Kirby to really reflect a family working together and the dynamics of a family, both good and bad. And I think this movie really that was the heart of this movie, and that's really what I think people will enjoy about this movie is the dynamics between these characters as family members. You can really Shakman as a director, I think, and he did WandaVision. Mm-hmm. So if you haven't seen the TV series, good news. You don't have to have seen the TV series to have watched this movie. But it does give you a good sense of how well he builds characters.
Yeah.
And especially mothers, with Wanda and also with Sue Storm and her relationship with Franklin and wanting to be a mother and just how important motherhood is to her. That really stood out to me in this movie. And just the power of those relational bonds between people. You go through, as a family, you can go through a lot of changes. That was something that stood out in my second watching of the film, is that, these guys they go through something that would be traumatic for most people, but the strength of their family and their bond is what brings them through it. And then they go through even more traumas kind of throughout the course of the movie. There's a scene where they're all sitting around the table, when they're having the discussion around how they can defeat Galactus and what is the solution here. And they're talking it through as a family. And they all have different viewpoints and they all have different perspectives. But you can tell that it's their love and care for each other. It's kind of them against the world. And, Ben even kind of says that in a certain extent. It's like everyone out there is crazy and kind of against them, and they feel like it's them against the world. But I think that was the strength of this movie, is just that bond that you see develops between the two of them, between the four of them in less than 2 hours. But it's really phenomenal what Shakman is able to do in terms of developing that relational bond.
I love the way that he styles his worlds and the way his world building works in the MCU. And I really hope he does more projects in the future, because I think he's great in terms of just his vision of what he wants his project to look like. And then you referenced the characters, and I think that that's where he really shines, is this relational aspect and like the character development and the growth. I never thought about the mother aspect that you just mentioned, in terms of Wanda with her kids and then Sue with Franklin, and just what they're able to do with their abilities when it comes to saving their kids. You can really see, you know, the power and like what their kids mean to them as moms, and it's really cool, and I've never thought about that before. The way he displayed Sue Storm's love for Franklin and the ability to like push back Galactus, which did kill her because of how powerful he is, but to push back Galactus for her kid because of the love she had for Franklin, it kind of shows you the extent that she is willing to go to protect Franklin at all costs. And I think, yeah, Shakman did a great job of displaying that. And relationally, as a whole for the family, you can just see that they love each other, and the connection that they had, whether it was them as a cast, that they were just like super connected. And you could probably tell that like as a cast, they did have some love for each other, because it translated into their characters into the movie. One of my favorite scenes was when Sue Storm walks out with Franklin Richards. And, you know, this is during the time of when all of them are getting backlash because the Fantastic Four and Reed Richards specifically has willingly admitted that they will not give up their child to save the planet. And Sue Storm comes out and she talks about her backstory with her family and the loss of her mom, and just how important it is for family to stick together and how hard it can be when a piece of that family is ripped away. And so she talks about, you know, I'm not willing to sacrifice Franklin to save the world, but I'm not willing to sacrifice the world for my baby, showing the importance of family and not giving up on your family and keeping everyone together as a whole. And she talks about how the Fantastic Four's original family was just the people, and like that they're for the people, and that like all of them work together and all of them, you know, are there for each other. The family aspect as a whole throughout the whole movie, I think, was amazing. I know I mentioned that, you know, the love that they have for each other is very obvious. But yeah, I just think that this whole, you know, stick together, be there for each other was amazing. And when you look at the last two Marvel movies that have come out, you know, Thunderbolts is all about like, you are not alone, and that like, you know, there are other people who have been through this and we can be there together. Whereas this one's all about like, you know, family and just being there for your family.
There's an interview, or maybe it's somewhere I read, where Shakman's daughter is actually in the film. So the scene where Beast saves that little girl from, I think it's like something overhead falling on top of her, like the little blonde kid, she looks up and then the Beast saves her. So that's Matt Shakman's daughter. And what he talked about is kind of the strength of parents who, in his case, so they had their kids a little bit later on, a little bit later in life, and there's a different kind of, I guess, maybe tie to those children when you have them a little bit later on, and there's that even more desire to protect them and kind of watch over them and make sure that they're taken care of and that their best interest is at heart. And as a director, I would love to see him. I'm not sure what other kind of projects would be best suited to his very fine touch in terms of developing relationships, but definitely another Fantastic Four movie. You know, I don't think they need to, you know, they should find another director. I think he did an amazing job in terms of building these relational bonds. And it's also something I would love to see. They did this well in Thunderbolts, just in a different way as well. But Marvel's last two films have been doing a great job of really building into how important our interactions are with each other in terms of how the strength that we have to go out in the world and kind of do the things that we're empowered to do. So maybe that's a good segue. So we'll jump from relational and we'll go to physical, because I think these are the two, those are the two most prominent cores for me in the movie. And there's a lot of physical things to unpack here. So first of all, Jaden, what were the biggest kind of physical components that stood out to you from this film?
So physically, I think it definitely relies mostly into their powers. I'll talk about the Fantastic Four first, and then I'll go into Galactus and Silver Surfer, because physically, I think for those two, it was very different than the Fantastic Four. So on first watch, I actually thought that what I wanted to see more was their powers. And then on second watch, I realized they did display it quite a bit. And so I'm very happy with that, because I don't know why I kind of forgot about that whole first 10-minute sequence where they go over who the Fantastic Four are and kind of like a brief origin story over the newscast. And you're just seeing them use their powers against all these different types of villains. It was really cool to see that quick montage at the beginning, because I feel like that was enough to display their abilities and their origin to me without going deep into it, especially as someone who knows the Fantastic Four origin already. But yeah, the movie does a great job of showing their powers. I mean, Human Torch looks awesome. Reed Richards, I think Mr. Fantastic doesn't do it a ton, but in the parts that they do it, they're like useful moments, right? Yeah. Like whether he's going around the ship and stretching his arms out, or he's teaching in class, or he's climbing Galactus, they display his powers in like good, useful circumstances. Sue Storm, they probably do the most, right? Especially at the end of the movie. Just her ability to, move things with her mind and her powers and turn herself invisible. You can see like Franklin inside of her stomach, and then also like turning the ship invisible, which I thought was a cool use of her powers in the space sequence, is like her ability to make their ship look invisible when they're trying to get away from Silver Surfer. And then the Thing just looked awesome, right? Like the Thing, running through buildings and punching things. And yeah, he was cool. Silver Surfer, though, might have been my favorite use of like what a character is able to do in this world. I mean, watching her surf on like the black hole Stardust, or watching her surf on the lava, watching her phase through the ship or the helicopters or whatever, the fact that she can move at the speed of light. When I first heard about the movie and saw the first trailer, wasn't too sure about Shia LaBeouf and Silver Surfer, only because I like the OG so much.
Right.
This one was incredible, and I'm so happy that they did such a good job with her, because it was just awesome to see. I think like she was so a lot of my favorite moments had to do with her, and they just did an amazing job with her in displaying her powers. And like her whole like surfing on different things and all these elements was just, it was wild. Her backstory was cool too, and why she became the Herald for Galactus. And then Galactus was just jarring. And Galactus is a character that from the comics, I'm thinking, well, how do you put this into a movie? How do you make this a big screen character, especially like with how crazy some of his lore is? But the way that they did it, I think, was almost perfect. He should be able to hold planets in his palm, and he was out there walking on Earth. And I can see why some people might be like, I don't know about that. But to take a character like of that stature from the comics and put him into a movie, that was impressive. And that first reveal when you see him on his ship and when you hear him for the first time, and like the use of like his eyes as the ability to like see, to analyze stuff, like to look for Franklin Richards, but then also go into like his normal eyeballs that like can just like detect things. It was just cool. Like Galactus was awesome.
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, there was a part of me that, although we've seen it twice, I would love to see this on an IMAX screen with Galactus. Kind of reminded me, so visually when I was thinking about this, just the production design of this movie, not since Doctor Strange have I seen an MCU movie where visually I was just engaged in terms of how they designed things. And Galactus's design, the tweaks they made from the comic books and the details in terms of all the lights and the massive pipe things that were attached to him and stuff. And then you see him in the ship. Physically, just it's overwhelming. It's a very cool. If you don't see this in the theater, you're missing out. If you wait to see this on a TV screen, unless it's at the biggest TV screen you can find, Galactus's stature is amazing. And I would also agree how they did the Silver Surfer and the visual effects for her, and just how smooth and seamless everything looked. Like, it reminded me of the first time, dating myself a little bit, but seeing Terminator 2 in theaters, and they had the molten metal Terminator, and at the time that was visually like amazing. This reminded me a lot of that, and how they portrayed both of them, because between the Silver Surfer and Galactus and Franklin, you have three of the most powerful characters in comic book lore. And I was curious as to how, I remember going in, I was like, well, we know they can't defeat Galactus. So like, what's this movie going to be about?
Yeah.
So there was a part of us that thought, maybe Galactus was going to be kind of a side, not really a villain, but an antagonist here. And Doctor Doom would be introduced kind of in the movie, but no, it's Galactus throughout. But I thought the way that they did it counterbalanced the two elements in terms of Galactus's supreme power and the Fantastic Four, the strength of these guys and the strength of this movie, which they did really well. And I think why the other movies haven't done as well, the other Fantastic Four movies, is that as a group, they're not really all that powerful, right? So the Thing is strong, but he's not as strong as the Hulk. The Human Torch is, it's a cool power to have, and it looks really cool on screen, but it doesn't really even compare to, say, a super soldier, for example.
Sure.
Right?
Or like Iron Man.
Or Iron Man,
yeah.
right? Someone who is versatile, and he's not really trained in anything per se, right? So, and then Reed Richards is, we'll get to him in a second, but the stretching power, your sister, my daughter, was saying, like, Reed Richards is just lame. Like, his power is just lame. You know what I mean? So, really, you've got, and then Sue. So, in our opinion, she's probably the most powerful of the four of them. And we, as you mentioned, she ends up sacrificing her life to not even defeat Galactus, just kind of push him a block or two, so that kind of gets to the climax of the movie. But physically, they were able to do a great job of contrasting like the immense power of Galactus and the Silver Surfer with the seemingly much less powerful Fantastic Four. But it never seemed like this was a complete mismatch. And that's a good segue to the mental core. With this movie, we have the introduction of, arguably, between Tony Stark, Charles Xavier, and Reed Richards. Reed Richards is probably at the top in terms of the most intelligent character in the MCU. Mm-hmm. And we see his intelligence on display right from the opening scene. We know that he is a scientist of great repute here on this earth. Like, he's teaching a TV show about science, and he's the one who's figured out how to get them to other planets. Like, it really is Reed's intellect that is able to help them not defeat Galactus, to counter him in this movie. And I thought what was really well done, and Pedro Pascal is kind of the summer of Pedro Pascal. We were eating before the movie, and I was like, Pedro's in like 3 movies that are showing right now at the movie theater. But he really is a great actor, and I wasn't sure about him as Reed Richards, but I think he did a phenomenal job of capturing this highly intelligent newfound father, who is trying to find this balance between making the right decisions, and he talks about this in the movie, what he feels his calling is, but also being able to emotionally relate to his family members and the earth in general around him. But what Shakman did a phenomenal job was displaying the intellect of Reed as being the reason why it's his decisions, from a scientific standpoint, that kind of push this movie forward. It's not really action scenes. It's what Reed decides to do, and the calculations that he makes, and his hypothesis and his intellect that really push this movie forward from scene to scene.
Yeah, his ability to change decisions like on the fly. I think they had 3 different outcomes for the ending that led to Galactus being teleported off of the planet, right? Like, it started earlier when they're like, we're going to go to him, we'll negotiate. Then they come back, it's like, okay, now I don't know what to do. Okay, we're going to teleport the Earth. That fails. Okay, now we're going to teleport Galactus. Like, he has to come up with these different ideas on the fly. And I mean,
and even just escaping Galactus' ship, he has to change decisions multiple times.
Right. Yeah. With the whole like going into the black hole to escape Silver Surfer, like he just is constantly coming up with these calculations on how to get out of certain situations, or what is the best decision to make. And yeah, he definitely is the smartest character I think the MCU has now. And it's impressive to see how good he is intellectually with just solving problems. And he talks about this with Sue, in that my job is to think about the terrible things so that terrible things do not happen. And I think he definitely feels the burden of it's his job and his responsibility that the team is okay, that Earth is okay. And it's cool to see like a hero who wants to take on that much responsibility. He talks about, feeling guilty still about not seeing ahead of time the cosmic power that they run into in space, and that transforms their DNA. And he's talking to the Thing about how, well, I should have seen it coming. I should have prepared us. And he just has such a tremendous love for his family that he wants to make sure he knows everything that is happening at all times, so that he can help them in any certain situation.
The last time we saw Charles and Reed Richards was, the Council in Multiverse of Madness, and they both got defeated pretty quickly by a crazed Wanda. But it will be interesting now to have both of them in the MCU and to see how these characters start to lead not only their respective teams, but the bigger role that they start to play in the MCU. But great job by Pedro of really effectively kind of demonstrating this interesting dynamic that Reed Richards has in terms of his intellect and his struggle almost with his intellect and what he feels like he is burdened with. Like in that scene that you're talking about, he's kind of like, well, it's my job to do this. And Sue's like, no, that's not your job. That's you. That's who you are. Right. Yeah. So it'll be really interesting to see, I think, going forward, how they develop this character. But I think they did a phenomenal job of displaying his intellect in this movie in a variety of different ways.
I would have loved to see him interact with Tony Stark. I would have loved to see him and Iron Man work together, but obviously that won't be the case. Yeah. But yeah, like you said, I think that he did a great job, and like truly his power is just his intellect. Yeah. Like the stretching is a side piece to that. Yeah. Really quickly on the mental note, I just want to talk about the Thing. And one of the biggest parts of the Thing in the comics is kind of this struggle with the way he looks and like dealing a little bit with depression in terms of how his DNA was altered the most physically compared to everyone else. Do you think that they should have tapped into that a little bit more in this movie?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's a great segue to the spiritual part, because that was the one thing that I thought from a spiritual aspect in the movie in terms of our identity and how we see ourselves. Yeah, it's a big part of the comic book. And I have a feeling, because you see kind of glimpses of it in the movie, right, where he's watching clips of himself before he changes and then afterwards, and he starts to develop, this romantic interest with this lady, but you can clearly see that he's not comfortable with it. I don't know. They could have certainly explored it more in this movie, and I think it would have added an added dynamic, and I think they probably would have done a fine job for it. But I think giving it some more screen time, either in a second movie or throughout the other movies that they're going to appear in, I think will be fine, because it is a really interesting aspect of his character, very similar to Tony Stark, right? Or not Tony Stark, Bruce Banner. And the Hulk. And we had this conversation, over dinner or at some point in time, where it was like, who would you rather be, like Bruce Banner or the Thing? And the question of, well, who am I really, right? Like, am I this thing, or am I this other person, or am I some combination of both of them? Is an interesting dynamic that I hope they explore more with Ben Grimm, because it is a big piece of the comic books.
Yeah.
Were there any other elements from a spiritual standpoint that you thought were relevant to this film?
I think Silver Surfer's switch up from being Galactus's herald to realizing, the damage she has done across the universe was a good one. So the whole reason she becomes Galactus's herald is to save her own planet from destruction, which then leads to her destroying other planets. And I think that she knows what she's doing, but she also doesn't realize what she's doing across the universe, because she was caught up in saving her own planet, until Johnny reveals the voices of all the planets around the universe to her. And Johnny says great scene, by the way, when Johnny flies up to her in space and he's like, you were saving your planet. That's what I'm just trying to do with mine. He says, like, just take me. yeah, I think that she realizes that, like, hey, what everyone else is trying to do against Galactus is exactly what I did against Galactus. And so I think she kind of goes through a spiritual journey of recognizing, you know, who did I used to be before I became the Herald, and what did I believe in, and what's more important to me. And eventually she turns on Galactus, and I would love to see more of her in the future of the MCU and what her role is going to be. But I think that that was a pretty important spiritual change from, you know, being this herald who knows this is my job and this is what I'm supposed to do. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks, to, you know, well, like what have I done to other planets, and what can I do to prevent destruction on this one?
Yeah, that's a great point. I hadn't really seen it from that perspective, but for sure, like she sacrificed her planet, or she was not willing to sacrifice her planet only to destroy all of these countless other planets since then. How much she had been dealing with that from a you know, an ethical, moral standpoint or whatever. Yeah, that's a great point. My only other spiritual thoughts from these movies were, you had basically two godlike characters in this film, right? Between Galactus and eventually Franklin, which we'll start to see him develop, I think, in the coming films. So nothing more to say that it'll be interesting to see how they develop Franklin. And, you know, there's a scene where Galactus is like, well, he's actually hiding his powers from you, right? Like you actually have no concept of who it is that you're actually dealing with. So as an infant, consciously or subconsciously, for him to be able to be suppressing the level of power and strength that he has will be an interesting dynamic to see. Yeah,
I mean, the fact that he was able to bring Sue Storm back to life as a baby. Yeah, I think we're in for a really good treat in the future of the MCU. And obviously, you know, I think that we kind of have our theories on what Doomsday is now going to be about to when we get into the post-credit scene, which we'll do in another video, because there's a lot to dive into in terms of, you know, what's next. Yeah. And this end credit scene was sick. And I think everyone kind of predicted, you know, Doctor Doom at some point has to show up. At some point he has to show up. It's the next movie after Spider-Man, and he's not going to be involved in Spider-Man. Two godlike characters on like two very like different sides of the spectrum. One's a brand new baby. The other one's billions of years old. Yeah. It was really cool to see. Yeah. And I think that the whole Galactus trying to get Franklin as his like successor was an awesome piece of the story. Yeah. And I think it gave Galactus a lot more motive to not just like come and just destroy Earth, because like he had something on Earth that he could have used and he needed, which eventually got him out onto Earth and walking around. So I think that was a cool story piece that I wasn't expecting. But yeah, like very powerful characters in the MCU, and Franklin is going to be something else come Secret Wars.
Yeah, I think we're definitely in for the treat in terms of these next few movies here, and we'll dive into that some more, because we talked about diving into Kevin Feige's announcement and talking about the future of the MCU and kind of where things are going there. Next year is going to be a huge year for movies, so we'll chat about that. But there's also some other big films coming up towards the end of this year. Definitely check out our other videos in the channel. Hit subscribe so that you're notified immediately when we drop our next one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.